Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 639 for the 6th of Elul in a regular year. So there is this GIF that was going around the internet, one of those little movie thingies that loops, like a picture that kind of loops over and over and over again. And it was going around a little while back of a subway car that was going really, really fast and moving in a certain direction. But then the interesting thing about this GIF was that if you looked at this image for long enough, and especially if you looked at it in a certain way, you could actually see the subway car moving in the opposite direction from what you first saw. So it's really wild. And I'm going to try to post this GIF in the show notes if I can, to give you guys really a nice visual for this idea of how cool it is that just with the power of perception, you could actually shift the direction that the subway car is moving. There are other examples of these kinds of optical illusions, of course. There's the one where there's like a woman that's like spinning around on one foot, and it's a similar idea. It's like, is she spinning to the right or is she spinning to the left? And people will say different things. And again, if you look at it long enough and you look at it with the right perspective, you can kind of control which way she is moving. We also know that there's this idea of those 3D images, right? That it's like you look at the image and at first it just looks like a big mishmash of colors and chaos and things like that. But again, if you look at it for long enough, or if you look at it from the right perspective, you can actually see an image pop out at you, a 3D image. So all of this is actually a very tangible way to help us understand something that we're going to be learning about today, which is that this shift of perspective, not only is it possible, but it's actually essential, and it is actually, in a certain sense, the very point of our lives. What do I mean by this? So we live in a world, right? And in our lives, we experience a lot of things. Some things are pleasant, some things not so much. We experience a lot of joy when good things happen to us. And I'm going to say, quote unquote, good things happen to us. Like it's our birthday and people bring us a lot of presents, things like that. And then we experience suffering sometimes when, quote unquote, bad things happen to us. When, somebody makes us angry, we lose a friend, whatever it is, different things. Everybody has their different experiences with this. But what we're going to be really focusing on today, and this is something that we've learned and focused on a lot in Tanya, throughout the Tanya, is that ultimately, when you get down deep enough into it, really everything is good. Because everything comes from God, and God is the essence of goodness. God, as we've been saying, is the purveyor of chesed, his most essential attribute, the primordial attribute from which all other experiences that we have of him come from, is chesed, is this loving, giving kindness. So true, this kindness can come about in different vestments. Sometimes it can appear more direct to us, and sometimes not so direct. We've used an analogy before of let's say if you have a parent who is disciplining their child, but it's always coming out of love. So it's sometimes it might seem more overtly out of love, like when she goes up to her child and she gives him a hug and a kiss and all of that kind of thing. But then there are times when it might not appear superficially as love, but it really is. When she tells him he has to go to sleep, when she says you must brush your teeth and he's kicking and screaming, and he really doesn't want to go to sleep, or stop eating that candy or whatever it is. This is also coming from a loving place, even though to the child, it doesn't necessarily appear as such. Or somebody who didn't really know about parenting, if they just saw this image from afar of a parent scolding their child and the child's crying, they might think this is a really horrible parent. But when you know the deeper meaning, what's really going on, you actually see this is coming from love. So this is the same idea with God and his relationship with us. Truly, if we get down deep enough into it, we recognize the fact that God is truly, truly doing good. And this isn't just like a nice, like a nicety thing that we say, like like just make ourselves feel better. It truly is the case. It truly is the case that God is doing good, and everything that we experience in our lives is truly good. It's not just for the sake of good, that it's like, okay, we have to go through this suffering in order to come to a better place. It's for our growth and things like that. That's like that idea of this is for the sake of good. Rather, it is good. And the only issue is that we don't always perceive it as such. However, just like these gifts and just like those 3D images, we can shift our perspective. And if we shift our perspective enough and in the right way, we can actually see that it truly is good. And not only is this something that we can do, but as we'll learn in today's Tanya, this is actually something that's incumbent upon us, that truly is the reason why we're brought down into the world, is to be able to do that. And not only that, to bring the point home even further, what we'll learn about tomorrow, but I'll mention it here now, if we don't do this, if we refuse to try to see beyond the image, the superficial image that we see in front of us, and if we instead choose to just assume, to just declare that no, it isn't good, it's bad, it's just bad as it is, we'll see that this is actually equivalent to idolatry, because this is ultimately a total and utter denial of God's goodness. So we don't want to do this, obviously. We don't want to be idolaters. So we really want to try to be better at shifting our perspective on goodness. So that's going to be the topic of today's episode, is this whole idea about shifting our perspective and seeing and coming to understand that everything is really good. And so let's get into the text. For context, we're beginning a new epistle today. It's Epistle 11 in Iggeres HaKodesh. So here we go. And so here, interestingly, with this epistle, just a little note on this, is that as you may have noticed, a lot of these epistles or all of these epistles, in fact, are letters that the Alter Rebbe wrote to his Chassidim, and they're written in very endearing fashion. And they're written in this kind of collective sense, like to his dear Chassidim, my dear followers, my dear brethren, all of that. The interesting thing about this one is that the Alter Rebbe begins this one actually addressing the singular. Instead of saying like, my dear brethren and that kind of thing, is the way he begins it is as if he's talking to one person. He starts off with a phrase where he says, Laskilcha bina, to enlighten you with understanding. And this you, in Hebrew, there's a you that's plural and there's a you that's singular. And in this case, the Alter Rebbe actually uses the singular, Laskilcha, instead of Laskilchem would be the plural. So why? Why is this? So the understanding of this is that really it's because the Alter Rebbe is talking on a very personal level here. And it's something that it's not just like a collective thing that we should all work on. What he's going to be teaching us in this epistle is something that is very individualistic and can be attained by every single individual on a very personal level. So what is it that the Alter Rebbe is going to be enlightening us with his understanding? So first, he starts off with the negative, what we shouldn't do. He says that this is not the way to have the light of God dwell within a person. What is not the way? To crave and desire physical, the life of the flesh and children and sustenance. So that's pretty intense, right? Way to start off. So basically the Alter Rebbe was saying you should not live your life desiring a family and desiring parnasa. That's not what your life goals should be about. Which seems really like shocking, right? Like you would think, like to the outside world, what could be a better goal than trying to raise a family, trying to make an honest living, all that stuff, right? So the Alter Rebbe is going to explain this. So he says that we can understand this through looking at a teaching of the sages that comes from Pirkei Avos, chapter 2, verse 4, where it says, Batel retzoncha chule. So nullify your will for the sake of his will. So what does this mean? This means that your will should truly be nullified in its source, and you shouldn't have any type of desire at all for anything this physical world, which includes children, life, and sustenance, bnei chaya mezoneh in Hebrew, which like we can translate in a more general sense that bnei, children, is like family, life is like health, and sustenance is really making a living, having a parnasa. So the Alter Rebbe says that really we're not here. This is something he's told us before. We're not here for physicality. That's not why we're here. And these desires that we have, we really ultimately want to get to a state where we actually nullify all of our desires for anything physical, including even these kind of things of health and wealth and having a family. So rather we should live in such a state of, and this is from Pirkei Avos also, chapter 4, verse 22, al kachacha tachai. There's a principle which means it is against your will that you are alive. So it's when we really, like, we think we've talked about this in Tanya previously, that to us, and consciously, we feel like we love life. We love our lives. We do anything to stay alive. We enjoy everything in life so much, eating, drinking, relationships, all that kind of stuff. But the truth is, in true essence, there's this idea that really we didn't come here because we wanted to. It's not like there are some philosophies and religions that think that we all chose to come down into this world. Judaism doesn't believe that. Judaism believes that we actually did not want to be born. Hashem forced us to be born for certain purposes. Yes, they're very lofty purposes. It's ultimately for the good of us, for our good, but we're not here for our will. So actually the deepest part of us doesn't actually want to be here. But nevertheless, it's like now that we are here, it's very hard to shift that perspective. Again, like that 3D image that we're trying to see of like, I don't really want this physical stuff as much as I think I do. It's like, how do you get to that? How do you shift your perspective in that way? And so the Alter Rebbe says, he says, the way to clarify this is the only way to gain this clarification in this way is through having a true faith in the Yotzer Bereshit, in God, essentially. Yotzer Bereshit is the one who formed the beginning. So meaning, Kabbalistically, we could say the Yotzer Reshit is Chochmah, so meaning that Hashem created everything from Chochmah, and meaning that this is, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain this. He says that this is that we see that the world was created something from nothing. Reshit Chochmah, so the beginning of Chochmah. So meaning Chochmah is kind of like this nothingness, this like it's like a bridge between the nothing and the something. That's where the world comes from. Is this like half something, half nothing? This Koachma, and so the world is created something from nothing all the time. This is a Chochmah that is not understood to any creation. And this creation occurs, this like something from nothing creation occurs from moment to moment, every single moment, from Hashem's Chochmah, from Hashem's blessed Chochmah that vitalizes everything. And so when a person really deepens their thought and contemplates this and meditates upon this idea and really forms a picture in their minds about the fact that we are coming into being from nothing at every moment, really, truly at every moment, then how can you ever imagine that something bad is happening to you? Because there's no suffering in relation to children or life or sustenance or any other suffering in the world. Okay, so why? So why is it, so let's just take a pause here. So why is it that this meditation that the Alter Rebbe is suggesting, he says, how do you get to this place of like not having your whole focus be on having like the optimal family and parnasa and have the end and health and like have that be your whole orientation in life? How do you do that? He says through engaging in this meditation where you recognize that everything comes from this ayin, everything comes from this chokhmah of Hashem. And so why does this help in this matter of leading your orientation to where it needs to be? Because when you recognize that this ayin, this nothingness, which you come from, which is coming about something from nothing at every moment, all the time, which is Hashem's chokhmah, this is the source of your life, and this is the source of goodness and the source of pleasure. And this is what's called Eden, like Gan Eden, like the Garden of Eden, which is above Olam Haba, above the next world. So it's coming from it's like total pleasure is this place. So meaning to say that like when people, like why is it that people put all their orientation towards family or sustenance or health? It's because there's a conception of a possible negative, a possible lack in that area, right? Like people don't really think about their health unless they're like not feeling good, God forbid, right? Or people don't really think about family so much like in so far, or at least not in terms of like craving a family or craving relationships unless they don't have it in some way, unless there's like some level of like suffering in that area. And so, however, what the Alter Rebbe is saying here is he's saying that when you recognize that really the source of your life, the source of everything really comes from God and really comes from this place of Hashem's chokhmah, which is the ultimate pleasure and the ultimate goodness, then there can be no bad. So it's because really ultimately the source of everything is good. The only thing is, the Alter Rebbe does acknowledge that he says this is not something that is understandable. So thus we do recognize that there is bad or suffering in the world. So to give like very practical examples with this, let's say b'nai in the concept in the realm of family. In the realm of family, people might feel like maybe they're not married yet, or maybe they are married and they can't have a child, or maybe they are married and they're having conflicts at home. They're fighting with their spouse. It's not what they thought marriage would be like. There can be it can feel very tumultuous, very, very sad, very intense, right? It could also be when it comes to chai, parnasa. How difficult can it feel sometimes to make a parnasa? It can feel very exhausting, and it can feel sometimes like, things aren't working out for you, and people can get very frustrated in this realm. And then so too with health, God forbid, people all the time, people are suffering, even minor things, they have a headache or whatever, or sometimes real health scares, God forbid. These are things that are true and part of life. It's a part of life that we experience these kind of things. But the Alter Rebbe is reminding us that yes, this is our experience, that we have this experience of suffering, but this is not the true reality. There's the happenings of what's happening, and then there's the meaning that we place on it. We place a meaning that it's bad, it's negative, we're suffering. The true truth is that it's ultimately really good. And it's true. We don't perceive it as totally good. And this is not something the Alter Rebbe wants to minimize. He says this is true. We see it as suffering, but it's not. So it's sort of like we want to recognize that, just like, again, if you're looking at that gif of the subway car moving in one direction, let's say you're looking at it with your friends and you see it moving to the right and your friend sees it moving to the left. It's like it can feel very frustrating because it's like you clearly see it moving to the right. Your friend's like, no, it's really moving to the left. A better example of this might be, even if you guys remember that thing with the color of the dress. Like, do you see there was a picture of this dress going around the internet, those of you who like follow the social media and stuff, of like, is the dress blue or blue and black, or is it gold and white? And it was really fascinating to see that people really saw the same dress as being two totally different colors. Now, the interesting thing about that example is that there was an objective answer. It turns out, believe it or not, that dress was actually blue and black. It was not gold and white. A lot of people did perceive it as gold and white, and that is true. Their perception really told them that, but that wasn't the objective reality. It's somehow, because of the lighting or whatever, it gave this like illusion to make it appear that it was like kind of gold and white, but the truth is it was actually blue and black. But just imagine there is a frustration. Let's say you were one of those people who sees it, who saw the dress as gold and white, and you're sitting there and you're like, I know it's black and blue. My logic tells me it's black and blue, but I don't see it as such. So both of those things are going on at the same time. That's sort of our lives, is the Alter Rebbe saying there needs to be this acknowledgement. So yes, on the one hand, we don't see reality for what it is. We experience suffering, and it's real, and it's hard. Life is difficult. On the other hand, we need to recognize that this is not true truth. True truth is not that it's bad. It's not a bad thing. We might be feeling pain. It might be difficult, but it's not objectively a bad thing that's happening. Because truly, says the Alter Rebbe, there is no bad that comes down from above. Everything is good. The only thing that Hashem brings down into the world is good. It's just that it's not understood because it's so great, because it's so tremendous, like just like it's like that 3D image. We can't see the 3D image on first glance because our eyes wouldn't be able to process it. It's like there's too much going on. There's too much intricate detail. So it's too much for us. So it's not because it's bad. It's because God is actually so high and so lofty that the good is not being translated to us. And this is another principle. The Alter Rebbe doesn't really get into it here so much, though he does address it elsewhere, that in fact, not only is it also good, like when we experience negative things, is it also good? On a certain level, it's actually even a greater good, because it's like sometimes a good that is so great that we wouldn't be able to perceive it and to handle it because of the greatness that it is. So it needs to be enclosed actually in this concealed manner, right? We can understand this again if we look at a parent. It's like when the parent hugs the child, is that an expression of love? Sure, that's an expression of love. But you can argue in a certain sense that in a certain way, the mother's love is actually more greater and stronger when she's disciplining the child, because she's actually teaching him lessons and training him for the future so that he will have like a good life and have be the best that he can be. Of course, not to minimize hugging. Hugging is very important and very good, but there is something to be said about sometimes the chesed that's included in Gevura is kind of a bigger, greater level of chesed, and that's why it needs to be enclosed in Gevura. This is a spiritual concept. But now back to the text. So the Alter Rebbe says this whole idea of like kind of having this thing in your mind, yes, you're experiencing suffering. Yes, life is hard, but recognizing that truly in true truth, even if you don't see it, it's truly good and everything is good. The Alter Rebbe says that this is actually the mainstay, the essence of faith, of emunah, for which man was created. So we are actually here in order to look past this 3D image, in order to see the image within the chaos, and to actually really believe that there is no place that is devoid of him. And the Alter Rebbe brings a citation here from Mishlei. This is from chapter 16, verse 15, where it says, Ve'ol pnei melech hayim. In the light of the king's countenance, there is life. So the deeper meaning behind this citation is actually interesting. Is that there's this idea that if a person is sentenced to if let's say somebody was living under the reignship of a king, and then let's say for whatever reason they were sentenced to death, if this person were to come face to face with the king, then their sentence there's a chance that the sentence would be commuted, and the king would see him and kind of have mercy on him, and he wouldn't be sentenced to death anymore. So the same holds true in our case, that basically it's like when we look the king in the eye, when we see God, when we see truth for what it is, then we can live, then we can have a true life. We won't suffer anymore. And in this manner, then the Alter Rebbe brings another citation, this time from Divrei Yamim, chapter 16, verse 27, where it says, Oz v'chedva bimkomo, strength and gladness are in his place. So there's this recognition that really, once we recognize God, what is God? God is strength and gladness and goodness. And because God is really just good all day long, there's only goodness. So that's the end of the section for today, and we will continue along these lines tomorrow when we continue to talk about the importance of seeing the good in everything and looking for the goodness, and how somebody who doesn't do this is actually likened to a heretic, God forbid, and how actually our perception can actually change the true reality of what is. So stay tuned for that, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.